and the loftiness of man shall be bowed down, and the haughtiness of man shall be made low, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day, and the idols shall he utterly abolish, and they shall go to the holes of the rocks, to the caves of the earth, for fear of the Lord, for the glory of his majesty, when he ariseth to shake terribly the earth.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing today in Genesis chapter 7. Let's begin by reading. And the Lord said unto Noah. Is that really as loud as it? Okay. And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. Of every clean beast shalt thou take to thee by sevens, the male and his female, and of the beasts that are not clean by two, the male and his female. Of fowls also of the air by sevens, the male and the female, to keep seed alive upon the face of all the earth. For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off the face of the earth. And Noah did according unto all that the Lord commanded him, and Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters was upon the earth. And Noah went in, and his sons, and his wife, and his sons' wives, with him into the ark, because of the waters of the flood. Of clean beasts, and of beasts that are not clean, and of fowls, and of everything that creepeth upon the earth. There went in 2 and 2 unto Noah into the ark, the male and the female, as God had commanded Noah. And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth. And in the 600th year of Noah, and in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. And the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. In the selfsame day entered Noah, and Shem, and Ham, and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife, and the 3 wives of his sons with them, into the ark. Then every beast after his kind, and all cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and every fowl after his kind, every bird of every sort. And they went in unto Noah into the ark, 2 and 2 of all flesh, wherein is the breath of life. And they that went in male and female of all flesh, as God had commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. And the flood was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters increased and bare up the ark, and it was lifted above the earth, and the waters prevailed, and were increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark went upon the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high hills that were under the whole heaven were covered. 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. And all flesh died that moveth upon the earth, both of fowl, and of cattle, and of beast, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, and every man. All in whose nostrils was the breath of life. Of all that was in the dry land died. And every living substance was destroyed, which was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle and creeping things. So the fowl, and the fowl of the heaven, and they were destroyed from the earth, and Noah only remained alive, and they that were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. And so then God brings about the end of the flood in the next chapter. So, and in fact, maybe we better read it, because we're going to be into that chapter, I can tell. So let's just keep reading. And God remembered Noah, and every living thing, and all the cattle that was with him in the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. And the fountains also of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained. And the waters returned from off the earth continually, And after the end of 150 days, the waters were abated. And the ark rested in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, on the mountains of Ararat. And the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the 1st day of the month, were the tops of the mountains seen. And it came to pass at the end of 40 days, that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. And he set forth a raven, which went forth to and fro until the waters were dried up from off the earth. And he also sent forth a dove from him, to see if the waters were abated from off the face of the ground. But the dove found no rest for the sole of her foot, and she returned unto him in the ark, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. Then he put forth his hand and took her, and pulled her in unto him into the ark. And he stayed yet another 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove out of the ark. And the dove came in unto him in the evening, and lo, in her mouth was an olive leaf plucked off. So Noah knew that the waters were abated from off the earth. And he stayed yet other 7 days, and sent forth the dove, which returned not again unto him any more. And it came to pass in the 601st year, in the 1st month, the 1st day of the month, the waters were dried up from off the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark, and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. And in the 2nd month, on the 27th day of the month, was the earth dried. And God spake unto Noah, saying, Go forth of the ark, thou and thy wife, and thy sons wives with thee. Bring forth with thee every living thing that is with thee, of all flesh, both of fowl and of cattle, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, that they may breed abundantly in the earth, and be fruitful, and multiply upon the earth. And Noah went forth, and his sons, and his wife, and his sons' wives with him. And every beast, every creeping thing, every fowl, and whatsoever creepeth upon the earth, after their kinds, went forth out of the ark. And Noah builded an altar unto the Lord, and took of every clean beast, and of every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a sweet savor. And the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake, for the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more every living thing as I have done. While the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. So he blesses the sons of Noah and Noah himself. Okay, so we go back to verse 17. Noah is shut up in the ark. As I was thinking about this as I was reading it, again, the point I would make is that when we talk about the inspiration of the word, certain things, like historic events, don't need to be inspired as far as I know. It's the parts that people wouldn't know. And so on that level, it begs the question, like, how concerned is God with, our perception of how perfectly communicated the Bible is? It is the presence of things, or let's say, like I said, there's a very clear surface interpretation that can be made. It's very easy to fall into, especially because I was raised to believe that was how it should be read. And so for me, it's a very difficult thing to step over into the territory where I'm looking at it and saying, okay, where I can allow myself to look at it and say, like, I'm not trying to undermine the scriptures. I'm trying to undermine an interpretation that I don't believe in, and trying to find if it be possible. Now, see, you got to use care. When I go into the Bible, I got to be careful not to be hunting for an interpretation. Meaning, I have an idea, and then I go about trying to prove it. That's something we don't want to. We want to be careful that we don't do that. We may have that in our hearts. We have an idea, and we want to see if it's true. But when we go about finding out if it's true, we got to continue to be watchful. Like I said, I want to be very careful about what I allow myself to do, what I allow myself to consider. I've always been not always, but I've been for a while. I'm not a huge read between the lines type of person, right? As far as when it comes to interpreting the Bible. Certainly not as a primary way of understanding. Though there is subtext very often we find, meaning there's something going on more than just what you see on the page. Obviously, every parable is like that. It's not just a story. This story is telling us about something else. It's communicating a deeper truth. And of course, Noah's Ark communicates a deeper truth, but that does not mean that the telling of the story was not believed to be true. And so when I think about it, it's like there's clues here that sort of demonstrate what I was talking about. The flood, just because the flood appeared to destroy everything to Noah, and everything he knew would be wiped out, you know what I mean? Is it some necessity? Does God have to then say, well, you got to understand, Noah, let me give you my perspective on things. Because I think this is what trips people up. They think like, well, if it was a local flood, sure, it's possible that Noah wouldn't understand that or know it or even understand necessarily. Does God tell him, oh, the earth is a globe? Or maybe he knows this because this is something that one can find out if one lives long enough and is curious. Noah may have understood all these things already. I don't know. But there's certain clues that make me feel like, okay, yeah. One of the verses that stuck out to me was when it said, where was it? There was one particular verse I was like, For example, because one of the things some people will say, well, Moses wrote the Pentateuch. And I'm like, okay, but Moses doesn't claim to write the Pentateuch. I could see Moses being responsible for Exodus. I know this is not what scholars think. They all think that's all written in Babylon and all that. I think that's wrong. I don't believe that. No, and that's sort of radical skepticism. There's like this either people totally just take this surface level literal interpretation of events, or on the other hand, they just doubt everything. They think none of this ever happened. There's no historicity, even in the Book of Kings, they look at all that with the utmost skepticism, with the presumption that it's false, which seems strange. I understand you'd be skeptical of all the details, and of certain events, especially when they're fantastical, to understand why people would be reluctant to believe in them. Because we don't see things every day. Every day we don't see someone like Samson. Every day you don't see someone like, or Goliath or whatever. And so people, though these days, nobody doubts the idea that there probably was a giant, and there have been giants. We've seen giants in our lifetime. A 9-foot tall man is an aberration, but not an impossibility. And so, there's so much about history we don't know. But what was my verse? The verse I really wanted. Yeah, this verse 5. The waters decreased continually until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, were the tops of the mountains seen. He's in there for the better part of a year, if you notice. We start in the second month, we end up on the second month again. So it's the better part. It rains for 40 days, 40 nights. The waters prevail for about 150 days, and then they begin to abate until the 10th month, and they decrease. But what I noticed here, were the tops of the mountains seen? That gives you an ark-based perspective. That tells us that this is as seen from the ark. And, and so, when the perspective of one who is experiencing this flood is of a total annihilation, is it God's responsibility to inform us if that is not totally the case? If it was actually more of a localized event, in the midst of a bunch of events, actually, that did wipe out most of civilization, if not all. Well, a civilization, yes. The civilization that existed prior to the flood is gone. There may be traces of it. We were talking about that, but, and also I thought was a great revelation for me, just when I realized that, as Jesus said, as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of Son of Man. That meant that the inverse was also true. or that could be true. Actually, it doesn't mean it is true. In some ways, it's different. Salvation comes through being on the ark, which is that is a picture of salvation in Christ in the tribulation. But as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it also be in the days of the Son of Man. And then we could also think, well, in the days of Noah were, so shall it be as the days of the Son of Man shall be, so shall it be, so was it in the days of Noah. Boy, I can't put that sentence out. And then we talked about the angels and about Revelation, where it talks about the creatures that come out of the bottomless pit being very similar, in my thought, to the idea of if not the Nephilim themselves, the sons of God, the angels that sinned, that are imprisoned somehow, and then they're released in the book of Revelation. We see them drawn out of the bottomless pit by the angel of the bottomless pit, who is the destroyer Abaddon, which is just another key. Is it some? If it's not Satan, it's another lieutenant. Okay, so but like that idea, the ark-based perspective. Meaning this is Noah's account, what he experienced, or something of that nature, maybe Shem, Ham, and Japheth, or whatever. But the point was, not a lot. Not a lot gets through the flood as far as information. About what was. So we know this, that the world that was perished, being overflowed with water, and that it was exceedingly wicked. And if we go the same way, we will also be destroyed, though the Lord has said, not as before, not with a flood. And not necessarily to destroy everything either. God isn't going to kill. When Jesus comes, he's not killing everybody. So there's another thing. When God comes, yes, there is wrath. There's a third part of men that are going to be slain at some point. And that's a lot. But that's not the flood. The flood was not a third part of men died. No. According to what the text seems to say, at least on the very, every living substance, which was on the face of the ground. Again, you can consider that. We can presume a global perspective, but we can also presume a local perspective, since it's not clear that Noah would have understood. Look, a flood that completely destroyed his world. Does he need to know what's going? Does it? And that was complete. And like I said, I do think that when I look at a lot of times, when I want to understand what the nature of God is, I look to the Gospels to how Jesus was in the world. Because I really do think it gives us a lot of insight on the nature of God. And his attitude towards certain things, to me, is telling. He, that austere man perspective. He has mercy and love, but he also severity. He also has a very hard edge to him. As of course he would. But like you see in the parables and stuff, there are times with the wicked, when he's decisive with them, there is no turning. There is no doubt. You know what I mean? If you were blind, then you had no sin. Or because you say you see. Now, just think about all the ways he was very severe on the people who had hypocritically, manipulated the faith of God for their own benefit, or for their own, their own benefit, basically, just for themselves, so that they could look important, so that they could be big, high people in society. And that's a lot of what religion becomes. A lot of religious teachers are just doing it to amass a following. But Jesus was not like that. And so, I don't know, I guess when I see a story and I think someone could take it the wrong way, I think, well, that's not at all, why do you speak to them in parables? Because seeing you understand and can believe, but they see not. They may be brought to pass what it was written in the scriptures, that eyes they have and they see not. Ears they have, they hear not. Neither do they understand. Lest they should believe, lest they should repent, and I should heal them. and his willingness to destroy the world, and all the men upon it. Like I said, it's and like, you don't have, because it's like the biggest question for man is not like, what team are you going to be on? You can be on God's team, or, like, because confronted with the reality of your own destruction in the face of, men, if God were present with us, you remember Adam and Eve sinned, and then they heard God walking in the garden. So his presence wasn't constantly obvious. Even in the garden, the Lord would sort of walk off as if God would not be present. But of course he's always present. He can't not be present. The blood of Abel cried out to him to the ground the moment it hit. He knew. It's like a loud, oh, blood hit the ground. I know. He knew. And the flood also. I have to understand it all in a very purposeful sense. And then what is it? It's the demonstration of like I said, we don't have an understanding properly of what fair means. The flood was fair. They all deserved to die. The only unfair about it was the mercy and grace he showed to Noah. Noah found grace. He could have, what's implicit in that, he could have destroyed Noah. Absolutely. He did not owe it to Noah. You alone have I found righteous. I reckoned righteous. I like I said, it's like, I don't see in the Old Testament like this works-based salvation. God never accepted anybody except on the basis of grace. There's no man who could get to him, is my assertion. There's not a just man upon the earth that doeth good and sinneth not. That's what, was that Proverbs or Ecclesiastes? I think it's Ecclesiastes. The truth is, there are just men, but they're not the kind that never make mistakes. Always do good. We do good through the mercy of God because he overlooks our sins. And through Jesus Christ, we have the absolute assurance of that. That's the thing about Jesus. Like, they didn't have any assurance. Noah didn't have any assurance. He had to keep trying to follow God in the hopes God would be merciful to him. And continually sacrifice, continually make offering, continually seek the Lord, pray to God, ask forgiveness. And God would look down and go, okay, I'm going to have pity on you because I see you care. You sorrow for your sin, and he was merciful. The rest of the world, so what about the animals? That's an interesting thing, because God, when he was going to destroy Nineveh, he pled the fate of the beasts to Noah. No, not to Noah, to Jonah, the other one. To Jonah. All these men who don't know their right hand from their left and all the cattle. You just want me to destroy everything again? Because God does destroy everything sometimes. But I suppose there's certain instances where we get gung-ho about it, that he's sort of like, it makes God stand back and look at us. You're all for the destruction of these, huh? If I was human, I'd be maybe thinking more about like, hey, Lord, why don't you, those bad, have mercy on them. Maybe you should have mercy. How about mercy? I would be advising mercy to the Lord. But instead, men want to see each other destroyed. And like I said, and people will look at this and say, oh, all the children that were innocent. There's no such thing as an innocent child. And here's the thing. I was talking to a family member, and this is no slam against them, but an interesting fact, and it made me think. They grew up in a big family, and they were saying how, they liked being in a big family, but, they thought maybe they only wanted, like, 3 kids, maybe 4 at the most, right? Which is still a sizable family, and, and I was going to say respectable, respectably large, because I have more respect for people who have children and more children, because it's, of course, if you can have children, because we need to bring about the next generation. It's one of the things that he says to Noah: go for, they should replenish the earth, and we're to continue doing that. It's part of occupying. It's part of what proves us. What proves me as a man is my sons, my grandchildren. What people say about me, it takes time. It's that you don't just get to be somebody because you were born to be somebody. I mean, the life sometimes does hand you that, but it doesn't work that way with God. Noah found favor in the eyes of God. And so in this, what about destroying? Well, it's sometimes, there are plenty of times where God absolutely puts what he calls, what was that word in Hebrew? Is it korban? Yeah, korban. But when something is under like what's called a divine curse, there are several examples of this in the Old Testament, where God orders the destruction of the Amorites and all that pertains to them, all the way down to little. Getting back to what I was saying, they said they only wanted 3 children. I'm like, you realize if your parents thought that, you wouldn't exist. You would never have lived. They're like, yeah, it's like, and they'd say, yeah, it's kind of strange. It's funny like that. See, every time you draw, any person who's ever drawn a line in the sand and says like, all right, this is enough kids. Don't talk to me about when God decides that's enough people. Don't tell me anything about it. You would forbid the coming into the world, the granting of life to anyone. You would forbid it to anyone, to your own offspring. You would deny them. Again, I do. That's why I realized, I'm like, boy, I said 8 was enough. Now, when I thought I might have, there were a couple times where I thought it might be 9. And honestly, I was excited to have 9, but also content to stay with 8. I've been like that the whole way, actually. I was excited for 2, content with 1. Excited for 3, content with 2. And I tried to be that way the whole way through. But honestly, after 8, I started being very mindful of like, okay, I don't think I want to have any more kids. Why can't God say that? Why can't God say I don't want to have any more kids? Or these kids, it's time for them to get out. He can. He does. He will. He will. If we don't want to conform ourselves to his way of reality, we're not going to be part of reality. Just like the people in the flood. Just like the animals in the flood. The people and their animals. Maybe they love those animals. The animals go too. It's got the stink of the people on them. I don't know. Why in particular. Sometimes even that which pertains to them. Just less, again, it may seem irrational. Because there's not necessarily, why? There's no rationality that decides 5 and 4. I mean, maybe there is in a human calculation. But on some level, it's arbitrary. How could you, 20 years before you have children, know how many you could afford or how many you want? How would you know? How would anyone know? When people set out their lives and say, I want this many. It's arbitrary. It's arbitrary. Sometimes, because poor people have tons of kids. So don't tell me you can't afford kids. How do they afford them in Bangladesh? You know what I mean? You can't afford kids. Give me a break. You lie. You mean your lifestyle won't allow you to have more kids. You're greedy. And you look at this and you look down your nose at God, and it's like, you know what? Everything your child would have had has gone down into flames. Every cow, every chicken, all their future accomplishments never will be wiped out ahead of time. People don't like to think like that. I do. I like to think in counterfactuals and also in possibilities. Because we consider when we think God owes us a living. He owes every man, woman, and child a living, and a happy one at that. Oh, a happy one at that. Sometimes God likes to start over. Sometimes he doesn't want any more children or animals, and he wants to go with a clean slate. And as far as fairness goes, that's entirely fair. People don't like it. I understand from your perspective, from the human perspective, evil has come upon them. It's like the lake of fire. There's something, like when you read that scene of them being tossed in the lake of fire, doesn't it seem like there's something evil about the lake of fire? It's not anything wicked. It is the righteous punishment of God. But it is a frightening image. It's a terrifying image. It is considered this place of terror. But it is what is in store for those who refuse to put on their wedding garments and be part of this wedding. That's it. He's recruiting, and it's like you can join yourself to him, make peace with God, take hold of his strength, as it says. If we take hold of his strength, we can make peace with him. You know? Because we have to understand, I don't have the strength to preserve myself. To work salvation for me. That's not happening. Noah himself, did he work his way to, by faith he built the ark. Yes. By faith Noah built the ark. You notice that faith, there's a lot of doing in that though. It's like, I believe there's going to be a flood, but I'm just too busy to prepare for it. That can happen. You might genuinely believe something and do nothing about it. It's a tragedy. To me, that's like the one talent guy. I had one talent. I had this thought that Jesus was real, I believed in God. And I went to church when I was a kid. And I never repudiated it, but I also left it infantile. Just went about my life. Never invested in my relationship with God. Yeah, and when God, he will come and say, yeah, you knew about me. You knew I was an austere man, reaping where I sowed not. You knew. And yet you did nothing. We live in this world that says, it's a harsh world. It's so hard. God is so cruel. Oh, you knew God was cruel. And you didn't think like, well, let's see how we can please him. Because people won't like me saying God's cruel. His wrath is cruel. It is. Not that he is cruel or unmerciful, but there's not mercy for all. You know what I mean? He's not all merciful. He's all knowing, all wise. Not all. There's, honestly, there's some ways in which God does not have he understands the perverse wisdom of the wicked, but it is not his wisdom. As Jesus said, the children of this world are more shrewd in their generations than the children of light, very often, until this comes along, until the Lord decides to intercede, and he shows Noah, let me tell you how to build an ark. Oh, yeah, because he instructed him on how to make it. We read that. So they are in the ark, all the living things. Again, every living thing, it seems very universal. Every. Again, but is it contextual? Well, I think it could be. I think it could be contextual to within every living thing. In that context of where his focus is with Noah. Though, like I said, I've never been very comfortable with that, and I still feel very icky about it. But, I don't know. Yeah. It would be much more comforting to be able to be as rigorous with the words of Genesis as I am with the words of Paul. I want to do that, but like I said, there's that reading doesn't work. And I know it doesn't because I watched the work of those who did it, like the Ark Museum and all that stuff. And I don't think it's plausible. Not that interpretation. The story is plausible, completely. I believe the story. It's just the way the details are portrayed, by the those who are the most woodenly literal in their interpretation. That doesn't work. But I tell you what, that is a very easy interpretation to make. I got to give him credit where credit is due. It's like, there's a lot of details. You know what I mean? It seems like these details, these numbers, why would they be there? There's so much taken with the whole process of the flood, the going away, But again, it's not implausible to think about it in another way. I got to wonder, if I didn't have this perspective of the world as a globe, as meaning like literally I can picture the globe in my mind. I can see it rotating in my mind. I can see the earth hung in space, rotating slowly. You know what I mean? I've seen pictures of the earth from space. I've seen all kinds of stuff, right? If I had never seen any of that stuff, how would I think about these things? I'm not saying I'd believe the earth was flat. Even if I knew it was much bigger and it was round and all that, it's still very hard to visualize. And also, is that really going to be in my mind? Well, I don't know. But the idea that part of the story could be hidden is not out of the realm of possibility, though I'm not a fan of that kind of reading either. What else was going on? So God remembers Noah and every living thing, and all the cattle that was with him in the ark, and he made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. So the waters being blown away by a wind, or to, what was the word assuage mean? To back off or something like that? That's what I think of. I think of assuage as more of a confrontation type word. Hold on, Genesis 1 here. That's the problem. We need Genesis 8. So, assuage, what's the word in Hebrew? To decrease or abate. They went down. The waters went down. So even like what, that would be, I don't know, like I said, I'm not going to, I feel weird getting into the details and trying to, when I talk about it, I like to talk in general terms because I don't feel comfortable like necessarily like attacking individual details because I think that it's like, sounds fine to me. 150 days. Okay. That's how long it took, it sounds kind of arbitrary and the numbers almost sound symbolic, like the 40 days and 40 nights. But again, of course it'll be 40 days and 40 nights because that is a symbolic number. Like just like they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. This idea of probation. So the waters returned from off the earth continually. After the end of the 150 days, the waters were abated. And that means they had gone down, but obviously not completely down. And the ark came to rest. So the ark grounded up somewhere in the mountains of Ararat. Now they've looked up there for the ark, and there's an ark, quote unquote, shaped structure, and I've seen it. And the thing is, they're supposed to be doing cores and stuff, and the general archaeological stuff that you would do for such a thing. They hadn't been doing that previously, but they've been literally in the last 4 or 5 years, I believe, they've started this to look at it seriously. So we will know in the next decade or so if that is anything up there. You know what I mean? I've always said that, like, it seems pretty logical to assume that the mountains of Ararat that they referred to here are the mountains of Ararat as we know them. There is a Mount Ararat, but there's also the mount, I guess, a chain of mountains. So it's not clear exactly where or what. I remember a friend of mine, he had a theory that the ark was burned, that you'd never find it. I don't know. That's an interesting thought. I thought those are days. Like, I think Noah probably burned the ark afterwards. He's like, yeah. I was like, I don't know. Doesn't seem like something like, well, whatever. But it's not in the scriptures, so we don't have any. That's an interesting theory. Just like a lot of things we could say. We have a lot of different theories. Oh yeah, and the windows of heaven now are stopped. The rains of heaven. The windows of heaven, that have been stopped, sounds like it has something to do with the rains. And like I said, so the idea that specifically refers to what would I call it? What is the word? Something, I keep thinking galactic, but galactic's not the word. Something astronomical or whatever. Something sort of spaceborne. Like I said, the tail of a comet or something like that. I mean, it could be. We do have in the book of Revelation the windows of heaven being opened again. Well, heaven departed as a scroll when it was rolled together. Which is a lot like a window opening, actually, if you think about it. And the heavens were parted as a scroll when it was rolled together, meaning the scroll is rolled together and then you part it, like you open it. I always thought of it when I was a kid. I thought of it as like when when you have a shade and you pull down a little and you let go and it goes up real fast. That's I thought the heavens left like that, like a scroll when it was rolled together, like a window shade going up real fast. Obviously, they wouldn't have had any knowledge of such things when they wrote of that. No, it was talking about the opening of a scroll that was double rolled and then you open it up, just like the 7 seals being opened. And then that opens the heavens, so to speak. And the heavens being opened implies, we're having things from the heavens come into the earth. Rain, yes, but perhaps this is more. Again, it's supposition, but every person who talks about a global flood that's all at once, even in the time frame that they believe is appropriate, they always have to include a lot of meteor activity during the flood because we have all those meteor craters, all hundreds, world killers, some of them. So many of them, like, major nuclear detonations. And they would cause, I forgot what, there was a year called the worst year. It was like some year, I forgot what year it was. Darn it. It was like 500 or 400 or 300 or something. But it was like, there was some event, I forget if it was a volcano, I forgot if it was a airburst, but like, and it caused like it to snow in the summertime and all kinds of stuff like that. You can have, so what I'm saying is, a lot of these things would cause some really bad stuff to happen, but most of them aren't very fresh. That's the other thing, is they're coming in all these different states of erosion. And the fact that they're on the surface and not covered by water. Because of the things that happened during the flood, wouldn't they all be... because here's the thing. If, like, when I get a fossil and it's like filled with all these bodies of these little creatures, right? And there are places where you have these huge rock formations formed of like billions of little creatures that have all fallen dead and formed into a rock. And probably representing generations of creatures, not all at once a die-off. Though there are plenty of all-once die-offs in the fossil record because of mass extinctions, which happen from time to time. And also, that's the cataclysm. Here's another cataclysm. We talk about mass extinction. And there was a mass extinction about 12,000 years ago, actually. When all the megafauna died, the mammoths are gone. A lot of the creatures that were part of man's ancient history are now gone. Whether you agree with a young or old Earth, we all know that this is so, right? We know that the animals that we, because the Ark people, we believe in all the animals. We all believe in all the same animals. They believe that the animals are real. The dinosaurs are real, right? We all believe that they're real. I want to get through this. The waters decreased, continuing to the 10th month, and the 10th month, the first day of the month, were the tops of the mountains seen. Okay. He opened the door. So the ark came to rest, actually, before they even saw the mountains. Is that what it's saying? Yeah. And then he could see the mountains, right? He had that window in the ark, right? At the end of 40 days, again, 40 days after it comes to rest, I presume, right? They're on the first day of the month, like, they're almost a year out. And he opens the window, and he sends forth a raven, which goes to and fro until the waters were dried up. Well, it means he sent the raven, it just kept going. And of course, I don't understand the raven part because, I don't think he's not intelligent or something, but he sent forth a raven which went to and fro. And assuming ravens obviously are carrion birds, I don't know if after a year there'd be a lot of carrion floating around. But to be, like, I don't know what the raven, it just flew around. And then he sent forth a dove to see. Maybe when he sent forth the raven, it was not to see anything. It's just that he sent forth a raven and it went forth to and fro. Maybe he knew that wouldn't come back until the waters were abated. I don't know. The raven doesn't get another mention. I'm not sure what he's trying to accomplish with the raven because I think he knows what he's doing. He sends forth the raven. I don't know why. But then he sends forth the dove to see because the dove's going to behave differently. When the dove finds no place to rest, she returns. And he takes the dove back in and pulled it back into the ark. And because I remember Arnold Murray used to say that the raven was eating carrion, and I'm thinking, okay, a year. We're talking a year out here. I don't think there's any carrion to eat. Also, yeah, would there be carrion floating around? I don't think so. dead fish, I guess. I don't know. Would the dead fish still be? And that's another thing. It's like Noah didn't take any fish on the ark. A lot of mass extinctions affect fish too. I don't know. Like the flood would not have no effect on fish life. Yeah, I think. I don't know. Well, if it was global in nature, obviously it's going to be an issue. But again, since now what is done is they invoke what I would call lightning evolution, blitz evolution, where in just a couple hundred years you can have all the kinds of bears. So anything's possible. You only need a couple fish to make every kind in a very short amount of time. Because, and again, sure. I mean, God can rapidly evolve bears into new bears, no problem. But again, I just didn't know that was something that they took seriously, and I don't think outside of them anyone does take it seriously. The idea that could happen that fast. But you know what? I'm not sure that isn't true actually, because a lot of things do happen in a geological wink. Be shocked at how fast things happen. So it's like, I know this, that I trust the Lord Jesus. And definitely, there's something about Noah we're supposed to pay attention to. Okay? So then the dove comes later. She has this olive leaf. And so he knew that there's growing again, right? And so he waits yet another week and sends forth the dove. And then this time the dove doesn't come back. And so then, in the 601st year, in the first month, and the first day of the month, the waters were dried up from off the earth, and Noah removed the covering of the ark, and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. Interesting, the door is called the covering. And what about the word, I never looked at it. It's funny, because we always talk, build me an ark, build me an ark. And it always throws me off sometimes, as I forget. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, Paul, what about, don't forget about new people or beginners. What's an ark? You know what I mean? What is an ark? Where's that word come from? Does it mean a box? Because I think of the Ark of the Covenant, right? Tibah. It means a box or a chest. Yep, a box. Probably of foreign origin. Interesting. It's not a Hebrew word. Don't let any of that worry about it, because it's like, the Bible wasn't originally written in English either. So, of course, like Adam and Eve and Noah wouldn't have spoke Hebrew probably. Maybe they did. I don't know. Maybe that was the original language. I don't think that's how it works, right? I'm not sure. Hebrew is part of a family of languages. So there's the ark. Okay, it means a box or chest. That's fine. Big box. And it's described as, like I said, a rectangular prism. We usually round off the edges in the conceptualizations. They always make it into a boat, interestingly. When truthfully, it would be easier to just make a big box, I'll tell you that. And I don't know, it's interesting. I think it's interesting the people who go to the trouble of trying to make the model size of the ark. And it's interesting that they've done that and then they've calculated how many creatures they can fit, because they've taken this very seriously. I'm not sure we need to go, I don't think we really ever needed to go that route. Because like I said, it seems like the fundamentalists and also on the other hand, the radical skeptics and the atheists, they all agree on one thing, that the Bible should be taken absolutely literally, or it should be treated like a bunch of barbaric nonsense. And I think that either or proposition is totally wrong. It's not either to be taken totally literally and without, and is free from any sort of corruption or anything like that, because we know that's not true. It's not totally free. So how can you trust it then? Because I trust the Lord Jesus. My primary trust, and plus we're talking about things like numbers and stuff. We're not talking about things like, okay, is it okay to kill or not? I have the Holy Spirit in my conscience to help me understand right and wrong. If there was something in the Bible that was perverse, like there was one time a misprint in the Bible that said, thou shalt commit adultery. That didn't spawn a whole new religion just because the Bible was misprinted in one spot. And for the most part, there's nothing, what is it in the Bible that's going to be changed so significantly that's going to throw things off? Most of the changes are innocuous. And there aren't a whole lot of them either. Let me make that very clear. There aren't a whole lot of changes, but when it comes to certain things, certain areas, I reserve my greatest skepticism for those parts of the Bible that are least likely to be inspired. Things like when they said, like, oh, we counted the number of people. Well, that didn't say we went to God and said, hey, God, we don't want to count. Could you just tell us how many people there are by your Holy Spirit power? That's not what happens. And does God say, okay, when they count, I guarantee the number's right, and when they put in the scripture, I'm going to guarantee they copy it right all the time? Well, it didn't always happen, so God didn't guarantee that. And it doesn't have to. And it's like, but that allows people to doubt. Well, there's all kinds of things in the world that allow people to doubt. Doubt is a part of life. Like faith there's going to be doubt. If you have faith and doubt now, then you're very blessed. If you have faith and doubt now, there's nothing that's impossible to you. But very often there is doubt. It's not good. We want to exercise the doubt. I believe, Lord, help my unbelief. I doubt, Lord, teach me that I doubt no more. Be believing, not doubting. But the fact that that happens is manifest. The apostles went through all this doubting for our sake, so that we could be like, okay, I don't have to consider myself anathema to Christ just because I had some doubts. When I see that the apostle Thomas himself, embarrassing himself like that in front of the Lord. I want to put my fingers in his side, At least I didn't say that, right? So they go out of the ark, saved from the destruction and all the creatures that they had saved. And it's very, every beast, every creeping fowl, whatsoever creepeth upon the earth, and their kinds went forth there. Sounds like universal. But again, if I read that in the context of a region or a part of the earth, it is every creature, every fowl. It all depends on the context. And again, while a strong case can be made for a truly global flood textually, I find it very hard based on, I do believe that the world we see is an unmediated testimony of what's happened, of history, of God's handiwork. Because men didn't make it. Men didn't make the rocks. Men didn't, we had the geology. But again, I say, did the original world, did the old world have mountains? Were the old world mountains there by action of plate tectonics? What caused the mountains? I was having this thought the other day that I think some people, they think if God had created the world, it would be like if he had created it whole and entire and then just populated it, right? Like the way the story makes it sound like it all happened in 1 week, literally. If he did that, what would the earth look like? I almost imagine the most unimaginative beginning of if you were doing that in a video game, it would be regular hills, like a golf ball, like an inverse of a golf ball, just dimpled with hills regularly. Is that what we would expect? Some regular patterns. Right? Meaning that's what we look for when we look for signs of manufacture. We'd want to see evidence of God using a giant saw blade to cut the mountains in half here and make a canyon or something. It would look artificial. We expect to see that. But instead we see natural processes at work. They work in several ways. They work over a long period of time, and the processes work slowly. Right? There's that. Wind and erosion, rain and sun. I could have documented the erosion of the side of my barn from the time I bought it 20 years ago. As the sun batters it and the paint and all that fades and flakes. Right? That's all part of life. But well, there are also catastrophic forces that shape the world. Things that destroy it, things that bring life to an end. And these things have happened. And men lived through it. And there's a reason. It's like when men first were created, almost immediately, and I think this is true. This idea that there was man existed primitively for so long, we were just running around in our loincloths and hiding in cave. Caveman is a myth. Caves were special. Men have used caves and lived in them. They still do. It's like there's never a man, like all the men live in caves, like caveman. Because man can't figure out how to make a lean-to or something. We now know that back when we think men were living in caves, they were building them. They were building megalithic structures. And they had knowledge to do so that we don't know where it came from. But we could guess. From the time of man's creation, man was... we were, in some measure, must have been there's something stronger about man in his youth. We talk about, even as individuals in our youth, we have this strength and vigor. And I think the species was the same way. The first men. Because this is one thing I've always talked to people, that our DNA degrades over time. We're not evolving into greater creatures. We're devolving from the perfection that was into these different races, into this different, there's this one man had so much, and I call it like rich DNA, but like he had perfect, unradiated, not subject to the gamma and the radiation and the ultraviolet radiation, not, hadn't been subject to the pollutions of this world yet. And everything that's come of it is yes, there are evolutionary forces at work, but they split and diversify us. But it's not an upward trajectory. I don't think so. We his days shall be 120 years. We have to get to that place. We don't know how you get there. Most people don't get 120 years, like he says coming up. Yet his days shall be 120 years. My spirit will not always strive. Do we already have that verse? Did I just not talk about that? Or maybe that's coming up. I forget that, because the narrative of the flood is quite long. It stretches over several chapters. It's interesting to me the details we get versus the ones we don't. So then Noah builded an altar to the Lord and took of every clean beast, of every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a sweet savor. And the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground anymore for man's sake. And we're talking about this sweet savor when the offering is burnt. Now, when you cook food, it smells good, right? But not always. I've been psychologically affected in such a way that the smell of food did not smell good to me. You know what I mean? And I think that that's what the sweet savor really means in this context of sacrifice. That when God smells the sweet savor, it means he looks favorably on the sacrifice. Because there's other place where it says, this is a stink in my nose, a smoke in my nose, a fire that burns. There's ways in which it becomes an irritating smoke. Another time he calls it a sweet savor. The same thing. The same thing. And again, it may seem wasteful. Well, why would he suddenly offer these, burn these animals? And again, I don't know that necessarily the whole animal. You don't necessarily burn the whole animal up as a burnt offering. You burnt parts of it, and the rest of it was eaten. It's like the sacrificial lamb of Passover. They ate most of it. Part of it was burnt, usually the organs and the fat. And they were offered to the Lord in the burnt offering. And what is the point of making sacrifice? Well, because, again, our lives are forfeit. We are God's debtors at all times. We are always offending him in small ways. I know this is in very small ways. I am not fit for his kingdom. I would be a mismatch, a complete, I would be a smoke in his nose all the day. The way at least as I am as a human being, unaffected by the gospel, unaffected by the power of Christ, right? And so I need to be different. And so, but what can I do? I can't be different. I gotta. So the sacrifice is positioned as a substitute for the one. It's a way of offering something, saying, I've offended you, O Lord. One, you can't just, the Lord does not just want sacrifices. This, again, Does God say, make me a sacrifice? No, Noah makes an offering. From the beginning, men are making offerings to God. And people don't get this because the scriptures are very clear. The God is always saying, like, look, I didn't want your sacrifices. People say, well, the Old Testament talks about all kinds of sacrifices. No, it's because to the Lord you will offer your sacrifices. You will not offer sacrifices to other things, to other gods. That's the point. It's like you do offer sacrifices. But where do you offer them? To whom do you offer them? Every man makes sacrifices. He has to. On some metaphorical level, but also ultimately, if we can't offer sacrifices to God that are acceptable, we ourselves will not be accepted. And that's why what he said to Cain, if you do well, will you not be accepted? Because this is the next offering, so it's got to be important, right? The first offering, Cain and Abel. Now we have, and of that came that age, and now we have in the line of Seth the inheritor Noah. Like I said, it's not a righteous line, except for after the fact, right? It's not like being born of Seth got you out of it didn't get you anything. Didn't get you anything. Except perhaps you got to hear the truth, And that's something, I guess. That's something. You never want to discount that, right? Like people always say, like, you wouldn't even be a believer if you weren't born where you were. It's like, yeah, well, okay. Tell me something I don't know. Is that supposed to impress me? Is that supposed to make me like, oh, well, gee, I'll stop believing then? Because God works the way he works and not the way you want him to work. So anyways, the offering of offerings is, like I said, they brought him an offering. They try to please God. In our human activities, we need and want to please God so that we can get his favor, to be forgiven of the things we have done to offend him. And that's where sacrifice comes in. Why does God accept sacrifice? Why, why is it the death of an animal? Why is life being forfeit? Why can't it just be grains? Sometimes it is. There is just offerings of grain, offerings of mint and anise and cumin, as Jesus said. But you neglect the weightier matters of judgment, mercy, and faith. And some sins don't get cleansed with anything except blood. Because you cannot buy off from certain sins. It's disgusting. It's perverse. Like imagine if someone could murder and just pay a price and be forgiven in money. No, the price for murder is blood. Always. And God, blood for blood. Now, he didn't slay Cain outright. That's a special case. That's why I look at that. Because later on he says it's going to be the post-flood law. But if man sheds man's blood, by man's hand shall his blood be shed, or must be shed. Man has to bring justice, right? We are called to bring justice. And so when we come to bring our offering to God, how can we talk about justice to God when we have sins that are worthy of blood? We've lied before God. We purged, things that he's like, you know what? You're not worthy of life anymore. Not yet. We've done things worthy of blood, and we would offer less to get his favor. God will not respect offerings that are not done to whatever, to spec, so to speak. We got to offer what is proper. Now, thankfully, we don't have to make offerings like Noah. We do offer our bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to the Lord. It's holy and acceptable because Christ has made it holy and acceptable, because he offered the blood offering that makes all that work. That is the acceptable exchange. And in order to take hold of that blood, he is only required that we have faith in him. Faith is a big ask, because doubt is always there, right? And a lot of other things, pride can get in the way of faith. I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to believe in fairy tales, right? Well, then don't. But if you want to get right with God, you have to acknowledge the degree to which we have sinned. And then we can make our sacrifice acceptable to God. And when we do it, it'll be a sweet savor. Offer your body as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. Like in your prayers, also in the New Testament, likened to a sweet savor to God. Also the offerings of money, Paul called a sweet savor to God. Because our sacrifices don't have to be of blood. With Christ having sacrifice, there is no more blood sacrifice. So as Christians, all those blood matters are taken up by Christ and cleansed by Christ, and hopefully we put those far from us. And now we're talking about things like, well, let's offer him our service. Let's offer him our best. Let's do for Christ as he has done for us. That's all. We're not trying to earn his favor or get rid of our sins. We have his favor. Our sins are behind us. And now with clean conscience, we can serve God. And that's the beauty of what the Lord has done. He's opened the way. We don't have to be living in doubt, making sacrifices, hoping that God is merciful towards us. His mercy has already been manifest in Christ. And so that which, we look at the flood here as that picture of salvation. At the end of it, there's a sacrifice, and God accepts it. We have Christ at the, his sacrifice brings us to the end of our faith, which is the salvation of our soul. We just got to walk all that way. I mean, it's already a purchased thing. It's already paid for. We just need to be there to collect it. It's already ours. And when I say that, I mean that in the least possible. I'm not trying to evoke any kind of imagery of earning salvation or works. But having received such a gift, we labor to walk worthy. And that's, again, that is it should be. What else would you be thinking? How can, is there any way I can get saved and do as little as possible? Is there any way I can get saved and neglect all the things that Jesus taught? If that's our mindset, we'll be like Cain. We got to be like Noah, who was a just man and perfect and walked with God. Again, that's in the mercy of God. But I'd like God to look at me that way, and indeed to say that in a way that it's so true that the little things which he's dismissing, which God is dismissing. Because say, is God lying about Noah by calling him just man and perfect in his generations? Is that a lie? Because he's not absolutely perfect? No, it's because it's a generalization. Generalizations aren't lies. Like saying everyone's going to be there or anything like that. It's not a lie. It's a figure of speech. There's a lot of figure of speech that aren't literally so. But it's the point. That goes throughout Hebrew, Greek, English, and all the human condition. And you got to be careful of that. That's why the danger of being too wooden. Now, I'm not saying you can wave away Noah's flood with saying that's just all figures of speech. That's not true. So while the earth remains, seed time and harvest. So he smells it. Well, no more curse the ground, for the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. We talked about this. Neither will I again smite any more every living thing, as I have done. And certainly, since that time, the whole world has not been subject to cataclysm. I do believe in a worldwide cataclysm. Like I said, but I do think it was Noah experienced a flood, but there was also other things probably going on at the same time, and that's what I would say. And because actually just the idea that we could account for all geology, because like I said, if you're a young Earth creationist, do you even get geology before? I mean, do you get to have it at the creation? Is the Earth just flat? I don't mean like a flat Earth. I mean like just a smooth globe with little ponds and rivers, or there were seas, right, and creatures, right? So we have some sort of seas, creatures. It doesn't mention mountains. Some denominations, they're like, if the Bible doesn't mention it, it didn't happen. So there were no mountains. Again, no, but there must be mountains, right? We assume. Because the mountains are very old, and the mountains get covered in the flood, right? So there were mountains. That's a good thing. You think about that. There were mountains. So God created an earth that was geologically active already, I presume. Or the mountains. Were they mountains that were made by geology? Were they different mountains when the flood was over? That's a good question. You know what I mean? Because, the world could have been so upheaved. I don't know. Interesting stuff, right? And so, the promise given, man's thoughts, I will not again curse the ground anymore for man's sake, for the imagination. Is that because of the flood? He cursed the ground and sent a flood upon it, right? And I wonder about that, about the farming aspect too. Because, like, it's an interesting thing because they don't suppose the man did farm. Let's say if the flood was when I think it might be, let's say 12,000 years ago, right? If it was then. You know, their farming wasn't thought to have begun till a couple thousand years after that. Now they're starting to see evidence of that in Turkey, like I was talking about. In those, and again, that's Turkey. That's close to Ararat. I don't know how close actually the sites are, but generally speaking, as far as you're talking about civilization blooming after the flood, and there being something right there, that's fascinating. I mean, that's fascinating that there was stuff being built right there in Turkey. But but the idea of the ground being cursed, I wonder if that means that we had like. The human beings in the antediluvial period maybe didn't do much farming at all because of the curse of the ground. And that does this imply that the ground is no longer under a curse? Or is he merely talking about the flood? I do think it's talking about the flood. The ground was cursed and that everything that walked on it was to be killed. Right? It grieved God in his heart that he made man upon the earth. All right. Yeah. Let me try to think. It's dependent me that I've made them. And I think when I meditate on that, because it repented the Lord, it grieved him that he had made us. What does that mean? What am I supposed to take from it? What are we supposed to take from that thought? Like I said, it's like you look at the man and the fact that he, like, the creation itself was worthy of destruction. You say, well, how is that? It's, Like, it seems almost like, well, wait a second. How did God make this thing and then he didn't like it right away? Is that some sort of failure? Like, he's like, oh, I'm sorry I made it. Well, I think he made it knowing he'd be sorry he made it. You know what I mean? Because like I said, you got to look at this from the perspective, like when I look at the New Testament, God created us. He has power, he created beings that are not righteous, beings that have the capacity for good and evil, that are like God in that, but also that we could become the sons of God with his power, but without him, we end up like Satan, essentially. And if we were given all the gifts, we would become like Satan. We are a lot like, tell me it isn't true. You know what I mean? Without God's help, isn't that where we would all end up? Yeah, if he hadn't revealed to me the truth. I don't know, but I think so. And that's the thing, is that God knew man would go astray. That's because God created men who were strayful, if that's a word. Who were froward. That is a word. Froward means to stray fro. We have to and fro. They were fro. He created men, and men were froward. And that's the purpose, was to redeem such. Because ultimately, I think his purpose is that we could be closer to him through having access to this knowledge. But that brings us closer to peril. Because we could also become more like Satan, having that knowledge and wisdom. And so I think for the Lord, the trade-off is worth it, to gain sons so much like himself. That's his purpose. And so in the doing of it, in this antediluvial period, he brings this about, that they all go astray. And to me, I think it's a demonstration. It's like this they are willingly ignorant of. We got to understand, like I said, the we could all be wiped out. God does not owe it to us. This earth was made for his pleasure, and it will please him. We can borrow it for a while, we can corrupt it for a while, but God will not stand by forever and let that happen. Now, he's not going to destroy the earth again as before, but he will send his son again. and he will set things right. No, day and night will not cease, not till the end. Not till the end. All right, we'll pick it up at chapter 9 tomorrow. We're long over today, so thanks for joining me. We'll be back again. Until then.
And the loftiness of man shall be bowed down, and the haughtiness of man shall be made low, and the Lord alone shall be exalted in that day, and the idols shall he utterly abolish, and they shall go to the holes of the rocks, to the cave,